Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to Claris Community Live. I'm Rosemary Tietge, Claris Community Manager, and I'm pleased to be joined today by Marc Larochelle from Productive Computing and Angie Wong from Claris, behind the scenes helping with production. And as always, as we get started, please click on the apps button down in your lower right and answer our quick 3-question poll. To help Marc and I pitch the presentation today, we just want to know where you are on your journey learning AI with FileMaker and whether or not you've completed the Claris Academy courses about AI and FileMaker. And so while you all do that, let me hand the microphone over to Marc, and he will introduce himself and just do a little framing for our demonstrations today.
Yes, hello, I'm Marc Larochelle from Productive Computing. Thanks for joining us today. Marc is me, and you might have seen me in the Claris Academy courses. I teach the Pro certifications and most recently the AI Fundamentals 2, which is another course for AI. It's a continuation of our semantic search, and now we're talking about large language models, which brings us to today's webinar. Today, we wanted to focus on what are practical use cases that we see in the wild or that developers have told us where AI is being deployed as we speak with FileMaker. So we have a lot of use cases to go through today. We'll be starting the presentation with just a few slides and a flyover of different use cases on paper, and then we'll spend the rest of the time going through a variety of demos. Both Rosemary and I have lots of things queued up for you to look at and see firsthand how this all works, and just to gain an overall appreciation of where AI could be used with FileMaker.
All right. So Marc, why don't you go? Let's talk about the use cases, and then I'll share the poll results to give people time to finish those up.
Yeah, sure. That'd be great. So I will share my screen now, and we will take it away. All right. So on this first and second slide, I want to just go over what you could consider good use cases for FileMaker and AI for the user, from the perspective of the customer or the user, the people actually using your solutions. So the first one is probably the obvious one: summarize and rewrite text, where you can take long-winded notes and summarize them, or you could rephrase a note, making it more clear. You could take a note that maybe was written in an unprofessional way and make it more professional, which you'll see a demo on all of these things here in a little bit. Next, we have summarize conversations. So picture how many databases you might have where people take notes, and the notes are happening on every given day. So you have one on Tuesday, one on Wednesday, and a bunch of notes now are being collected for a given contact, for example. Imagine being able to just take all those notes and consolidate them in one clear and concise summary across multiple records. It's really hard to do that any other way other than using AI potentially. Validating records is another big use of artificial intelligence, and that is the notion of, well, I have an email. Is it formatted correctly? I have a URL. Does it have all the things that make up a proper URL? Things like that. Is the zip code, does it match correctly to the given address? So you can use AI these days to at least initially validate your records in your data entry. Another biggie is determining sentiment, and that's the notion of receiving feedback from a customer that you might have in FileMaker, and you want to analyze the tone of that feedback and consider, what does that mean? In fact, Rosemary has a demo coming up which talks all about her observations with sentiment analysis. So we've got a demo on that one. Another obvious one, creative writing and content creation. It helps you generate drafts and descriptions or come up with different ideas. So this could be used when composing email or customer correspondence or anything where you need a helping hand on the creative side.
I'm going to admit I write like an engineer, and have been using AI a lot to help me up my writing like a marketer game.
Yeah, it's, it is sort of a I call it a sidekick. I wouldn't say that it replaces the human, but I say it definitely gets you started and is a great way to kick things off. Then here, find by natural language, and this is one where Claris really capitalized and really, I think, hit a home run, because the latest script step, which is the perform find by natural language, allows a user to search the database using everyday words rather than them being technically proficient in how FileMaker does a find. So you'll see a demo of me doing that here as well. And we cover a lot of these concepts, incidentally, through the Claris Academy course and some of our courses at Productive Computing University. So if you're seeing all this and you do want firsthand knowledge of it or instruction of it, Claris Academy and the other resources is a great place to start. All right, so let me continue on here and we'll go through some more user use cases. Summarize and, generate insights. Now, this is an interesting one because you can, well, first, let me go back to semantic find. Semantic find is another thing that Claris actually started with. That was the first introduction into artificial intelligence when it came to the Claris platform. We saw that introduced in Claris FileMaker 2024, and there's courses in the Academy on that as well. But this is the notion of locating related records, even without having the exact keywords. So it finds the meaning behind the text. And I do have a demo of semantic find here, which is, I think you'll enjoy. Generate insights is the other thing. Highlight trends or anomalies in data. So artificial intelligence is particularly good at finding a needle in a haystack, where you send it a bunch of data and it can find outlying attributes to that data. So a lot of times you can just send it like a log file or any kind of massive amount of data, and you say, well, tell me something interesting about this, or show me the outliers, or find things that I might not obviously find, and it'll do a great job at that, generating insights. Data classification and tagging, and you'll see a demo of this where I'm going to show you a FileMaker database that contains assets known as pictures, and we're going to be able to take that picture and have it analyzed, tagged, and classified just by what the AI model sees. Translating content. This is another biggie where nowadays you can, because these models have such an understanding of language, translation on the fly, or let's say you want to send somebody an email in a different language, you click a button and it's now transcribed or translated into any language you can think of. So I have a demo of that as well. Then suggest next actions. So picture yourself with a customer history. You've got their history of the products and services they've ordered. You've got all the notes you've taken, and put all of that into a construct. You send it to the model, and it might be able to determine what the next steps is for that customer. What other things might they be interested in? How long has it been since you've contacted them? And all of that is something that's very possible with today's options. Personalized assistance. This is the idea of answering the question, what's in my database? And you'll see an example of this too. This is really brought home with Perform SQL Query by Natural Language. That's a script step that was introduced in FileMaker 2025. And it allows you to ask a question in natural language. It goes into your data and does a local SQL query. It actually finds your data locally. Then it takes that query, sends the results of the text to AI, where it's then interpreted, curated, and brought back in a finalized, cohesive answer. It's almost like magic watching that happen. And you'll see me do that here in my last demo when we talk about analyzing sales people and their totals. All right, so that's a lot of different food for thought ideas for use cases for the user. But there's also a good amount of use cases for you as the developer, where you can say, how can AI help me as a developer? And I'm not just talking about going to ChatGPT and making a simple query or asking for help with a calc. That's all great, and that's definitely something people are doing. But I'm also talking about directly incorporating AI with your solutions today to help you as a developer. So let me explain. Creating sample data. This is a biggie. When it comes to sample data, I'm a firm believer that the better the sample data, the better the solution. because then you can test things properly. You can bring relevance to the customer. They can see data in a way that they're used to seeing it. And I have a demo that'll show you, like, from a simple prompt, how do we create a picture from that simple prompt? So that's an example of sample data. But I use AI for sample data a lot these days, both directly in ChatGPT, like I mentioned, but also directly in FileMaker, where I have, let's say, 100 records, and I'm going to just start with a simple ID and a simple prompt, and then it fills out all the fields accordingly. Like, for example, sample contacts, sample invoices, sample line items, sample products. AI has the ability to just create that stuff out of thin air based on a prompt.
Yeah, and I did that for my demo, because I obviously couldn't show you the actual feedback we got from Claris Engage. So I have a lot of imaginary speakers, sessions, and feedback.
Yeah. So it is great. And as developers, so often we are not in a position where we can use the actual data during testing, or we don't want to. So sample data is the next best thing. And if you create good sample data, you'll actually, in my opinion, you'll just have a better solution overall. Here's another one that a lot of developers struggle with, which is the notion of creating your own SQL queries. And when it comes to SQL queries, I'm talking about when we take advantage of the execute SQL function, which has been around in the product for a long time. But what notoriously happens is that it could be difficult or challenging to create the SQL query itself, especially if you didn't grow up, talking that language. So with this particular idea, you could incorporate the script step called perform SQL query by natural language. And within that, you can use the option get SQL. And when you use that option, then you get the SQL query, which you can then turn around, and you have now a great starting point for using it with execute SQL. So that's an example of where you directly want to connect AI to a given system, just for you, the developer, not necessarily for the user. Another one, similar in that same kind of idea, if you want to use the FileMaker data API, either using the script step directly and finding locally, or using it against the server, you can use the other perform find by natural language script step, again, available in FileMaker 2025. That will give you the option to turn this option on called find request as JSON. And when you connect that particular aspect of it, it creates the query that is appropriate for the data API. So again, this is something that a lot of developers struggle with. How do I create these queries quickly? And even if you are familiar with how to create these queries, it still saves you a lot of time just letting the AI figure out what that query should be based on your natural language questioning. So 2 good examples there. Here's another one that you'll see at the end of this webinar: construct HTML framework for dynamic charts and dashboards. So you can use AI to construct an HTML template, and then with that template, you insert it into a FileMaker web viewer, and then you merge data from your system into that web viewer by way of a function. And the bottom line is you get a really beautiful looking, in most cases, dashboard or chart in a way that would take you a long time to create manually if you had to do the HTML by hand. So I have a demo of that we can look at. And then you can replace or supplement the APIs that you might already be using today. So when you think about some of the APIs that we've used as developers a lot, over the years, we've had to have separate ones for zip code lookup, separate one to validate your email and web URLs, a separate one to do text manipulation, a separate API for translation, a separate API for grammar and spell checking, rewriting, and general knowledge. All of that stuff, a lot of that can be supplemented or completely replaced with a single AI provider, because a lot of these models know a lot of those things. Now, it doesn't replace everything. There's still obviously use cases where an actual API is needed for a specific piece of intelligence, but you can do a lot with just the one platform. So it's just another way of thinking about how I can incorporate one platform to handle all these things. So that hopefully will get you started with the ideas. But without further ado, unless you want to go to the survey now, Rosemary, Yeah, let's do that, and then we'll go to the demos.
All right, yeah. So on our first question, have you experimented with the new AI script steps and calculations from FileMaker 2025? We have 9% already using those features in production, 30% in development, 39% said no, but I'm planning to, and 21% said no, but I don't know where to start. Well, hopefully today will help you get started. And then more general on the AI-powered features, 12% say they have something in production, 14% in development, 50% have plans, and 25% don't know where to start. And for the Claris Academy courses, 38% have completed the semantic search course. 19% have taken the new using LLMs with FileMaker course. 48% have not started those courses yet, and 17% did not know about them. Well, now you do. I would encourage everyone to take these courses. We've had great reviews. We've been iterating them based on feedback to improve both the video content and the quizzes. So please do. And also someone sent a question about sample files. Yes, we'll share the links to the demos that are currently available as I go through. So watch for those in chat. And then if you visit the community thread for this episode again, and I'll share that in chat in a few minutes, we'll post the recording of the session and all the links to the resources there, either very late today or tomorrow morning.
Cool. Well, my
takeaway. Share that link to the post in chat for everybody.
I will do that. Yeah. And I just want to say thank you to Roche and saying the AI videos are really helpful.
Great. That's great. Well, it's interesting. That survey demonstrates that at least half or so have plans, and a portion of that, and there's still a large portion of people that really haven't started and want to. So I guess they're in the right place, because you're going to see a lot here over the next several minutes of real practical strategies that are not hard. Most of these are not hard to implement at all. In fact, I'd say about 2/3 of everything I'm about to show you and Rosemary's about to show you is actually covered between the two courses at the Academy as we speak. For some of the more difficult things, we do have a course at Productive Computing University if you want to take it to the next level. And when we get there, I'll talk about that a little bit more. But for now, I'll just dig into the first demo, and we'll look at perform find by natural language. So I have a file here that actually came directly from the Claris Academy course. This is the course where we talk about large language models. And this is the file you get with that course. And throughout that course, I walk you through all of this step by step. And one of the first lessons that we talk about is this idea of finding by natural language. And we're all familiar with how to find in FileMaker. Normally, you just go to find mode, put your cursor where you want to, or you might use the find up here, depending on how it's programmed. But the natural language find is just kind of a different way of thinking. I'll create a custom dialog box here, which asks the question, find inactive customers where the build to is San Francisco or Chicago. This is something a user might say. That's sort of a user frame of reference, the way they'd ask that. So I'll push OK now. And what it does is it interprets that and converts that into a FileMaker find. And it found 94 records out of 500. And it even preserves the actual find. If I go to records and say modify last find, there's my find requests. There are 2 find requests. The first one is showing me San Francisco, California in the build to. And the second one is showing me Chicago, Illinois. And both have the status inactive, which is another criteria that I said. Now, typically, if you ask the user to come up with this, they're getting their head around the fact that, okay, I need to say active and California, but then, and they usually can get that, but then they have trouble with the second request, which is they don't know if they should put the first request and the second request. And all of this tends to complicate the average user. So this makes it a lot easier. Let me give you another one here. This is find customers by main address, that's over here, main address versus billing address, located on the West Coast of the US. Again, another sort of a loosely worded something a user might ask. So I'll push OK. What's unique about this is you have to know something about the West Coast of the US in order to answer this question. So it found 112 records. And if I modify the last find to see what criteria it's using, it knows that, well, it's the main address because that's what was asked for. So California is a state that borders the West Coast. Oregon is a state that borders the West Coast. And so is Washington. So this is an example of where AI has to actually know the world in order to answer the question that the user asked about the location of their customer. And then I'll do another one here. Find all customers in California or any customer named Elton, which again could be tricky because once you introduce ors, customers start to get confused potentially. So in this request, found 118 records, and I'll go through here. The first criteria is California, so find anyone in California or anyone named Elton. So that's an example of perform find by natural language. This is available right now at the Claris Academy, and you can try this out, learn how it works, go under the hood, and it's actually quite simple. I'll quickly show you. It is, and most of this here is just me filling in the prompt, so that really has nothing to do with it. It's really just 2 script steps: configuring the count so that you can tell it the provider that you're using, and then this 1 script step, perform find by natural language, and you specify the account, the model you want to use, the prompt, which is the question, and then where to put the results, or in this case, get the found set. And that's it. It just goes and does a find for you. So it's a really good way to get started with integration, and it's fun to experiment with. All right, so that's the first demo. Any questions on that, Rosemary, or things I should pause for?
And I just wish that we had had this 25 years ago when I was training book editors to use FileMaker because they wanted to ask, they wanted to ask questions with words, and teaching them how to structure complex finds spent a lot of time doing that.
Right. Yes, because you have to train the user to do those complex finds. And then they have to remember how to do it.
Hard coding a lot of reports that have complex finds in them.
Right. So my next example, this is one that's,
just got a question, and that
okay.
in your example, the prompt had single quotes around some of the words, and when is this needed?
So I use single quotes when it comes to the prompts only because when we're building a calculation in FileMaker, let's say I was hard coding the prompt and I wanted to put a word in quotes, I just use the single quote because then I don't have to escape the quote character in order to preserve the quote. And that's not necessarily needed, but it helps the model better understand when you're looking for a keyword or a phrase versus just a sentence. So it's not necessarily required, but I often do it just to really bring the point home that I'm talking about a keyword or a phrase here, and that I want to accent that notion. But no, by no means is it required.
And actually, Eric asks, how about more complex finds that require extend and constrain?
You can do those, but sometimes when you go a little too far, I wouldn't say it gets confused, but sometimes it doesn't give you the results you're looking for. So there is a practical limit where it can do that. In fact, if you do simple finds, you can use simple models. If you're doing more advanced finds, you might want to bring up the model power a little bit. For example, I was using GPT 4.1 Nano at first, and that sometimes works on the simple things, but I'm finding that when it comes to just general natural finds, I like to use the mini model. So that'd be GPT 4.1 mini or even GPT-5 mini. Those are 2 models. If you're familiar with OpenAI, those are 2 of the common models that are very affordable and very effective with these FileMaker script steps. But yes, it can handle constrain and extend. No, it doesn't do that out of the box. You would have to incorporate constrain and extend in your own scripting. But you could start with a find and then based on that find, extend it or constrain it like you normally would. And in other words, you could commingle the AI find with your own finds afterwards by constraining or extending.
Yeah.
But
And
out of the box, it doesn't do that.
yeah, one last question on
Sure.
finds, and then let's move on. And
Yeah.
I'll address some of the other questions in my demo.
Okay.
So for perform find by natural language, do you need to embed your field information?
No, not at all. In fact, the only thing that goes to the model in that example is the prompt itself. Then what comes back, well, I should say that the prompt itself and the schema of the layout that you're working with. So the schema meaning the fields and the names of the fields and their meaning, that is sent to the model along with the prompt. And then what comes back is the find criteria that then behind the scenes FileMaker does a find. All right, good. Well, I'll continue. This next demo is the idea that I have a technician taking notes in the field, and they are, let's say they installed a HVAC unit, air conditioning and heating, and they put in a loosely worded note in their own language with not a lot of formality and a little bit of things that might not be professional in terms of how it went. Like, for example, pulled out the old unit. It's a heavy thing. New 3-ton went and okay, but attic space kind of tight. Had to mess with some duct rework. Took longer than I thought. System fired up fine, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of, typical someone in a hurry or someone just trying to deal with a mobile device and trying to put in a note or even taking it through dictation. So we can use AI to professionalize this. So now it takes that same note and then makes it a lot more appropriate for a permanent note or something that could be customer facing. It's a little bit more formal. Now we have proper sentences, proper grammar, capitalizations, punctuation. Maybe there was terminology that was misspelled. It can fix all of that. So this is using a built-in script step right in FileMaker. This is the generate response from model. So it did that. Likewise, you could turn it around and change your prompt ever so slightly to say, I like the note, but just give it to me in bullet point format. So now it summarizes that same note, but makes it in bullets. Maybe I want to change it to German. Let's make it professional and change it to German. Let's make it professional and change it to Spanish. You can do that too. Or come up with your own custom prompt. I could even say something like summarize as a single sentence. May not do that. Let's see what happens. No, that's multiple sentences. So I don't know what happened there, but these are the kinds of things you can do. And then for that, it's really simple. It is just really this script step. You still have to configure the account, but it's this one script step. And I happen to be using the latest model, GPT 5-Nano. So it's the latest, greatest, hot off the press, very affordable, very powerful, very quick, as you saw, and not that difficult to incorporate. So here's another practical example. So it wouldn't just clean up technician notes. You could use this for any note or for composing emails or for anything that has to do with constructing text in FileMaker. It could be this simple. All right, any questions on that?
I think there's a general question about when using third-party AI services, what data concerns or privacy should you keep in mind?
Right. And I'm going to let you address some of that in your demo where you, yeah. And then a lot of times, like the text about installing a air conditioning system, that text by itself, as long as you don't send, customer names and addresses and things like that, the text itself is probably not sensitive. It's just a note, and it has really no meaning or context in the world at large. So in those examples, no, but there are examples, and Rosemary will kind of address some of that, of where you want to be sensitive to actual customer names, things like that. And then I think Rosemary will also talk about how each model provider has its own rules and restrictions, and you can opt out of the information being used for training, and it's privatized and secure as it is out of the box. So at least for most of them.
And I'm just going to address one last question, which is how do you decide which model to use? And I think really, for me, it's been experimentation.
Yeah. A lot of it is experimentation. What I'm finding, because I've worked with 4 or 5 different providers now, Gemini, Anthropic, Cohere, and OpenAI is I think just like when we're trying to decide what platform to use to build XYZ, you kind of find a platform that works for you, that can do what you need it to do, and then you get to know it really well, and then that becomes your main platform. You're not restricted to use one, but once you find one that you like and that you trust and that works for you, you tend to stick with that and get good at it. For me, it's been OpenAI and Gemini are the two that I use most often. And I like OpenAI because they have such a wide variety of options, and I have yet to throw anything at it that it can't handle in one way or another. So it's a large platform and it does a lot, and they're one of the first to market. So that's what I choose for most everything. And as far as choosing a model, that again, experimentation, but out of the 85 or so models that OpenAI offers today, you can quickly hone that down to just the text-based ones, and then you can go to the non-reasoning ones, and then now you're dealing with just a small list of options. And I talk a little bit about this in the courses, and it's always changing too, by the way. So yeah, experimentation. But once you get the hang of what a model does and what it doesn't do and the pricing, then you can say, oh, this is good. When it comes to FileMaker script steps, there's a limited list of options that have been tested for models that have been tested. So you can start there and just use that as your starting point, because Claris said, okay, these are the ones that work, start there. And then you can veer off a little bit as long as they're compatible. They should work as well. I'm going to go into another demo here called Internet Research. A lot of times we think of models when it comes to integrating them with APIs as, oh, well, the model's not good because it's not trained through this date or that date. So I can't even use it because it doesn't know anything about pertinent data of today. Well, there's a solution to that, and you can train the model, or you can tell the model to do a search. And then it'll go do a search and include that with its response. So here's an example of a FileMaker database where I'm just going to start with one piece of information, jennifer.smith@target.com. So Target is a well-known brand here in the US or probably worldwide. And all I really have is that email address. So now I'm going to click this button, and it's going to use that domain. It's going to go do a search on the internet, and it's going to go get everything about target.com for my research here. So it knows the company name, it knows the summary of the company, the industry that it's in, the number of employees, the headquarters is in Minnesota. It knows the top 5 competitors. It knows the top 10 products and services offered. And most importantly, and one that really proves that it's doing a search, give me the 3 latest news articles on Target. And that has shown up here in a portal for me. So all of that was done just with an email address. So another practical example of where you can help your users. Oftentimes they only have an email address, but you want a lot more than that when you're researching a company or targeting a company for working with them. So this is a great way to do that. Under the hood on that, and I don't know how we're doing on time here. We're doing okay. I'll just show you what this is. Now this one does do the generate response from model. So this works with 2025 or above, FileMaker 2025 or above. And all I did was I switched the model from a regular text model to this one, GPT-4o search-preview, which, by the way, this model is in preview. I don't even know if they're charging for it at this point. Eventually, this will come out of preview and become live in public. So that is the only real change I did. But because I did that, now it has the ability to do a search. And then what I do is once I get the response back, I just parse the JSON into the fields. And then right down here is the only really tricky part, and it's not that tricky. I'm just parsing it because I get an array of data where I get the 3 different news articles. So here I have to do a quick loop to loop through Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3. And that's it. I mean, the whole script is 55 lines, and the first third or almost half of the script is just the pomp and circumstance that we all need for scripting, which is to validate that we have an API key, make sure that there's not data already existing. Everything from here to here pretty much is just normal FileMaker. This right here to here is the actual work from 19 through 24. That's just the work that's actually going and doing the AI call. And then the rest of this is just parsing the results. And to see the results, I'll show you that real quick. Under the data viewer, we have the results here. in my variable. And this is what I get back from that particular model. And I've got everything neat and clean in its own little field, you know, the name, the company summary. And you might say, well, how did you get it so structured like that? How did you tell the model exactly what you wanted? And that's really simple. It's all in the prompt. And let's see what I have here for the prompt. So first I say, extract the domain from this email address, and then I give it the email address. So that's the actual prompt, is simply saying, do this with that. And then the instructions are here under the script step, right here under instructions. And this is where I do get a little bit more elaborate, and because we need the data structured. It can't just be loose. It has to be structured. So this is where I give it essentially these 6 steps. First, I say the response should be JSON only, no tick marks, no introduction, no conclusion, and perform a search and, you know, make it strict so it only comes back as JSON. I go over and over to say we only want JSON here. Then I tell it the field names. I want the name, the company summary, the industry, the employee count, with very loose instructions within that. And then general instructions here, parse the email and extract the domain after the @ symbol. Treat common free email domains like Gmail, Yahoo, and Outlook, etc. No company found, because those are personal email domains. And then so on and so forth. So I just give it some instructions, and from there, it interprets the rest of it totally, almost by magic. And that's how powerful this has become. This file, by the way, is also available in our free course. So the file you saw earlier, the text file where we did the translations and the tech notes, and this file are available at our free course. And Rosemary has a link for you there in the chat on how to get these files today. Okay, any questions on that? All right, with that, I think let's hand it over to Rosemary.
All right. So first I'm gonna just share a couple of things. So last month, I shared a community insights article, and I'm just gonna drop it there. Talking about how I used generate response from model back in April when FileMaker 2025 was still in ETS and beta, to quickly summarize the survey responses we got for sessions, and just to give speakers more actionable feedback. And what I'm going to show you today is a few more things that I'm doing with survey data. But so first, I just want to address one thing that people are asking about around local models. So I am not using this as a hosted file. So if you want to have a hosted file and use the FileMaker server hosting, you can do that. And I shared a link to the white paper with information on how to get that set up and up and running. But what I did yesterday, in about half an hour with a little help from Ronnie, is I downloaded LM Studio from the internet. And if you just do a search for LM Studio, you'll get it. And then I downloaded their recommended model, which is the OpenAI GPT OSS 20 billion thing. That took about half an hour, and because it's a pretty big file. But now I am running this model locally on my MacBook Pro. So if you have an M series MacBook Pro, you can run these, and 32 gig or more of RAM. According to Ronnie, you can run these models with no problem. So I am running this model locally for experimentation and testing. And so I'm going to just walk you through kind of my prompt engineering as I thought about how do I want to code general survey responses. So here's my instructions. So here's the question. We asked the question, how can we improve our next event in the FileMaker events survey? And then I want to know what's the overall sentiment from that comment, and then what aspects of the event do people talk about? The food, the venue, the schedule, things like that. And then below that, I have, here's the response that I want to get back. And I just walked through this kind of in this, like, just prompt and response format a little bit. So here I got a very wordy response. That's not really helping me for coding the data. So then I said, next, return it as JSON, using that hint from Marc to say JSON only, no tick marks, etc. So there I've got some nice JSON. But I'm still getting sort of summary data, and I don't really need that. So then next I added a instruction to remove the details. Do that. And my response is very tight JSON with just the aspect. There's an array in here. It's not pretty formatted. Then I was like, okay, then I like tested that on a few different responses, and I got different wording for the aspects that I cared about based on the way the respondent wrote their response. So then I came in and said, here are the aspects I care about. So if someone is talking about session scheduling or breakouts, like the model is going to put those all under the same thing. So I'm not going to make it easier for me to code those things. So again, if I do that, I get, oh, now I'm getting commentary again. But the other thing I'm getting is now I'm seeing, oh, if there's like no response, I'm getting neutral or something. So if they don't talk about that aspect of the event in their response, I'm still getting something on that, and I don't want that. So my last prompt, I added the instruction, include only aspects mentioned and no details. So that was my final prompt. And then I got this nice tight JSON. So I took that then, once I had this prompt all organized, I took that over to my script. And so first step is I put those instructions into a variable. And then I construct my prompt in a variable, and that's just a calculation of response and that field from the survey. And then the last is in my generate response from model, again, using my local model that's running right here on my MacBook Pro, loop through all of this, and now loop through all the records. Next, pull out the overall sentiment value from the JSON, put that in a field. And then to complete this, do the rest of those aspects. So let me save this script and let me go over to my session survey layout. No, my event survey layout. And I'm just going to I'm going to omit a couple of records just so that we don't have to wait for it to loop through all 20. But now if I run this script, it should go through these records and give me those details. So again, having done this kind of work for DevCon and Claris Engage over the last 10 years or so, that survey analysis was a giant project, especially coding, reading every response and then trying to consistently code them. So having AI help us with that has been a huge boon.
And I think there's a big lesson to be learned about how you iterated over refining your prompts, and to almost experimenting and working it over and over again until you got the perfect prompt, which, brought back consistent results each time. And that's part of the marriage between the developer and the model, the give and take, the experimentation part of it.
Yeah, the experimentation is definitely part of it. And like, as I said, like I thought I had my prompt all firmed up, and then I tested it on a couple more records, and it was like, oh wait, that didn't quite work. And I just want to comment on everybody saying they're like looking at the chat. What I do after every episode, just as a reminder, is I pull the insights and all the links we share out of the chat and post it to the community. So if you go to the Community Live topic in Claris Community and find the announcement post for this episode, I will put all those resources, all the tips that are came out of chat into a summary post there. And I will just give me 1 second and I will share that link so that you can just bookmark that one link, and then you will not need to try to keep track of everything flying by in chat. So were there any questions about this
A couple
example?
of comments came in. Let's see, it looks like it started, well, there's several, but if I go from the 8:43 time frame, let's see, a little later than that. Have you checked the results against the actual responses?
Yes, I did do some spot checking and I agreed for the most part. Yes, with the responses.
Right. And one approach is to have AI interview you to define what you want to create the perfect prompt. So using the conversation to create the prompt. Where you use the prompt to create the results, people are saying you can use a conversation to create the prompt. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a common way to do it. The same prompt produces always the same result on the same data set, question mark?
Not always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have to almost validate, not everyone, but you have to spot check, and it doesn't always come up, because the data you're giving it is different each time. So it interprets it a little different each time. But
yeah, and there's a couple questions about just using this model. I want to say I had to do some playing around with the settings in my demo file to get it to work well with the GPT OSS model locally using LM Studio. And I think, at least for FileMaker Server, there's a limited number of models that we support with FileMaker Server.
Right.
And this model came out a few weeks ago. So that one is not yet supported with FileMaker Server 2025.
Right.
So for that, I would recommend sticking with the supported models. I also did play around in this demo using the old Cohere's Command R model from last year and got similar results.
Right. Right. And I think what you just said kind of answered the other questions about the models to use. And yeah, so that's very good. Well,
yeah, but I just want to, just for myself as a kind of advanced beginner in using AI in FileMaker, getting up and running locally for my local experimentation with LM Studio was way easier than I thought it was going to be.
Right. It's not as intimidating as you thought it might be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. So that's great. Thanks for that demo. I like to see the different aspects of, two different humans in the room using AI in two different ways, two different solutions, two different paths to get to results that were useful and huge time savings. So that's great.
That was the biggest thing, is the time savings of this was just amazing.
Right. Well, I've got a couple more demos, and I'll go through them now if now is a good time for that. We will look at, this is a demo, I actually get the idea from Angie, which is a lot of customers use and have container data in their FileMaker database system. And I have 102 records here in this little file, which are essentially pictures drawn by AI, paintings, if you will. And what I did to come up with this is I first I went to ChatGPT and said, give me 100 different prompts for how to create a painting with different genres, different time periods, inspired by different artists. And
Mark,
it came up
are
with,
you going to share your screen, please?
I thought I was. Okay, sorry about that.
All right. And while you do that, I am just going to, since we have about 10 minutes left, I am going to start our closing poll. So before you leave, if you have to leave early, please do answer our questions to let us know what you thought of today's session. And also just quick note, please reach out to me if you have ideas for topics or guests for future community lives.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Sorry I wasn't sharing my screen earlier, but this is a database that has 100 different paintings, if you will, generated by AI. And I did that not just to generate pictures, but to explore the notion of sample data when it's time to analyze pictures on behalf of customers. Customers often have container data just like this, whether it be paintings, photography, any number of things that they might store. And this one demo file has a lot of different examples of how you might go about creating the sample data and how to extract information from it. So starting from a simple prompt, just to show you an example of what I'm talking about, if I create a new record and then create a prompt that says, draw a detailed illustration like pencil art of the Eiffel Tower. So I can go through and have that. Now, what you're seeing here is using the traditional insert from URL script step, and it's making a direct call to OpenAI using a model that generates images. So that's what's happening here. That's why it takes a little longer, because images take longer to construct than a text response would. And I'm also using medium quality, so it's better than low quality. So it takes a little longer. The higher the quality, the longer it takes. So what it's done here is it constructed a pencil art inspired drawing of the Eiffel Tower. So great sample data, and that's how I created this whole database. So that's one aspect of AI creation. Then the next aspect is, well, that's great. What if a customer already has the picture, but they want to tag it, summarize it, perhaps give it a title, describe it? How does that work? So using AI and a different model, you can extract the metadata from that picture. So in this example, I'm sending the picture to AI and it's telling me what it sees. And that was quite quick, as you can see, because it didn't have to construct a picture, it just brought back the text after what it looked at. So it gave me a recommended title, Eiffel Echoes Sketch of a Landmark, summarized it, gave me a description, the style, figured out the type, the value. Now the value is completely random. I told it to say, give me a value between 10,000 and 1 million. So it randomized that. And then it tagged it with 10 different tags: Eiffel Tower, Paris, black and white, sketch, pencil, architecture. So now if a customer has all this locked data in a single container field, and if it's visual, then you can use AI in FileMaker to deconstruct that and then tag it and optimize it, or give your customers a way to find this that they never had options to before, or would take a human a long time to do. And they may not get it right either. Not that AI always gets it right, but it's certainly a step in the right direction. So that's that. Now, same with this, the same option is I can use another type of AI or another script step, which is to find SQL by natural language. So if I say to this prompt, see, list pictures in France. Let's see what it does there. Results found. Okay. I might not have this looking at the right fields here. But let me stop right there and just show you the semantic find, because that is also very interesting. Using the semantic find, which again is available in the course in the Claris Academy and Productive Computing University, I can say, find me pictures that look like or inspired by like a Dr. Seuss. So then it goes through the whole system and says, okay, this one is most likely one that represents that, followed by this, followed by that, followed by this and that. So it's taking a lot of the whimsical type artwork and coming up with that. Or find photos that are dark in color. So then it brings me the darker photos, those that use blacks or dark tones. Find me pictures that might include a female. And there's pictures that include a female. Find me anything that's inspired by pencil art. So here we have all the pencil art. And again, each one is ranked by most closest match to least closest match. Find me pictures that are outdoors. And then it goes here. So that's a semantic find. In that case, you would train the data using semantic find, and then you use the one script step, and it comes up with that list. So that's another demo. That one is available at our paid course called Artificial well, I can't remember the name of it now. It's at Productive Computing University, and it is AI Essentials for FileMaker Developers. That's a course there, and that file is there now. And I have one more, unless we have a lot of questions about that. But this one I don't want to miss because it's a good one. So here's an example of where we might want to do a dashboard or a chart and use AI to help us with that. So the first step that I did is I went to Claude using Opus 4.1, which is just the browser, log in as Claude, and perform I'd asked for a prompt that said, I need an HTML dashboard that does this, this, and this. And on its first shot, it gave me an HTML template. That template is embedded here in this file. You don't see it at the moment, but it's going to draw in this web viewer here in just a moment. So it's all I have here is a web viewer and a global variable, $HTML. On the right, I have a file or a table of salespeople with their totals. So using a combination of things here, I can click here and say, list the top 5 salespeople. And it'll go out and determine the top 5 salespeople. It will return the JSON results and then use the template to draw the dashboard or the chart. So everything you see here is the HTML. And because the HTML is constructed in such a way that once it gets this simple data here, this is all it's getting. It's just the name and the sales amount, total of 5 records in a JSON text format. And then the HTML does the rest, all the heavy lifting. It knows the total sales from that. It knows the average, it knows the top performer, and it has the chart. So using that same template, now I can choose a different prompt, like list the lowest 4 salespeople and sort from low to high. So that goes off. It queries my system here, file that's local to FileMaker, and then inserts it into the template. And then I'll do one more, list salespeople with the highest and lowest sales. Again, it goes through here, figures out who's the highest, who's the lowest, inserts it into the chart, and draws it in my web viewer. If you're curious what prompt I used to get this to happen, I was just as surprised as maybe you will be. And that was this prompt here. This is the exact screenshot that I used. This is the exact prompt I used. Here's my prompt. I'll quickly read it. I have a FileMaker demo file whereby I want to use the all-new script step generate response from model and have it perform JavaScript on a web viewer. What I'm looking for is HTML JavaScript code that I can put inside a web viewer to demonstrate connection between this FileMaker AI script step and a web viewer. I'm thinking something like on the left side, listing the salespeople, and on the right, a bar graph of that same information, so that after AI collects it, it would present the graph and the table in the web viewer. That was my only prompt. And like magic, it came up with what you see here on the right. So it took probably about a minute or so, maybe even longer. And then I click this button and it previews it right here on the right. And that was using Claude Opus 4.1, which just came out a few weeks ago as of this recording. So as you can see, things are changing very quickly, and what would have taken a long time, or someone who really has good HTML and CSS skills and art skills, I don't know how long it would take a real human to do this, but a long time. So, and that was my first prompt, first out of the box. Then I wove it into FileMaker, connected the dots, and that's the demo you saw.
All right. I think we're not going to be able to paste the prompt in chat as requested, but I will include that prompt in the text of the prompt in my wrap-up post for the session.
Sure.
And I saw one other question come through, and that was, what model did you use to generate images?
Okay, I'll find that out right now.
And also, can it be fine-tuned or trained to be more domain specific?
If you wanted to train a model, officially train it in the way that OpenAI or any of these other providers ask you to train it, then you'd have to use traditional API calls, train the model, and get it so that it's within your domain space. But if you use an elaborate prompt, a prompt that's several paragraphs long, or even several pages long, I mean, even thousands of characters, you could actually train your model sort of on the fly with each request. As an example, let's say you said, I want to categorize this picture, but I only want to use the following 100 categories. You could send it the 100 categories in the prompt, along with a description of what each category is to entail. And then it will only use those categories if you instruct it. So you could make your prompts much longer, much more elaborate, and in a sense, train it or guide it in a very distinct way. So the model we're using for create images is, where is it? Right here. It is this model, GPT-image-1. That's the standard response. And that, I believe, works with the responses. No, it works with its own endpoint. So if you're going to use this picture creation technique that you just saw, you're going to use the insert from URL script step built into FileMaker, and it's been there for a while. And this is the endpoint that you'd use. So that's the endpoint. You use that model. You'd have to look at the model documentation just to be sure. You have to change it to base 64 on its way back, or convert it from base 64 so that the container understands it. But you can see this right here, these 13 script steps, if you will, is all that
You're
it
not
takes.
sharing again.
Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah, I stopped sharing. I don't know how we're doing on time.
We are out of time.
Yeah.
So
Okay. But
thank
anyway, I told you the model. You heard it there on the recording.
Yeah. So thank you everybody for joining us today. And just quickly to wrap up the chat, I am thrilled to say that after this episode, about 60% of attendees are very confident or confident, and 40% are somewhat confident to start experimenting with AI in FileMaker 2025. And I know my math didn't work, but there were a few, 5% said not confident. And I've shared the word cloud, and it sounds like people want to start playing with dashboards, natural language search, and testing with local models. So thank you, Mark. Thank you, everybody else, for joining, and we'll get the recording out very soon. Bye.